Every day when I read the news now, I'm actually thinking in my head, has the country gone mad? And it seems to be getting worse every week. Like we're seeing things this week that are even worse than last week. And last week we wouldn't have even imagined if that was even possible. Here are some of the headlines. Church pledges allegiance to drag queens and LGBTQ+. Smash and grab causes retail outlets to lose billions in merchandise. Grade schools fight to keep pornographic books in their libraries. Schools make rules to exclude parents from information about their children. Bud Light sticks to its guns with Dylan Mulvaney. The United States is on track to admit a record number of illegal aliens through a completely porous southern border. Teen girls killed as a sacrifice in pagan cult ritual. Criminals released back on the streets with a new no bail rule. And this is barely skimming the surface. Has our country gone mad? And the next thought I've had is that all of this lunacy seems to have come on so fast, like almost out of nowhere, though I can clearly see the train of depravity coming through the decades that has brought us to this point. And yet, after decades of planting the seeds of decadence, watering the growing plants of immorality, nurturing the growing stalk of cultural collapse, and now seeing the large bud of godlessness blooming, what has all of a sudden caused it to burst forth into its inglorious and blasphemous obscenity? Now, we all know who the major players are here. The United Nations, WEF, the WHO, the United States, China, the cabal of influencer billionaires, the Pope, Big Pharma, tech companies, the mainstream media, G7, and the G20. But still, why the sudden flowering of madness? I've been thinking on this for months, and it has finally come clear. The blossoming of the flower of the antichrist of Revelation 13 and the whore of Babylon coincides with the inauguration of Joe Biden. As the leadership goes, so goes the nation. I've said before that Joe Biden is the Caligula of our day. And the LGBT are the antichrist. You can look at previous videos for that, but let me stir that potion for you so you can follow my drift. Caligula was the emperor of Rome for just 4 years. Though he started off as a moderate ruler, his reign quickly turned to cruelty, sadism, extravagance, sexual perversion, and ultimately he was deemed an insane tyrant. Joe Biden has hosted parties on the South Lawn of the White House where trans women have stripped down. He has approved the murder of babies in the womb and celebrates it. And he has spent taxpayer money like water, increasing the national debt to $33 trillion. And he is in a state of obvious mental decline. So I just checked all the boxes for you. Now, where Caligula fits into Revelation is potentially in several places. In Revelation 13, the beast out of the sea receives a mortal wound but comes back to life. Caligula had a dangerous illness that brought him close to death, but he survived. In Revelation 14, there is mention of the worship of the beast and its image. Toward the end of his reign, Caligula intended to set up a statue of himself in the Jerusalem temple. The plan was never enacted because Caligula died. Revelation 17 mentions the 7 hills on which the woman sits, an obvious reference to Rome. Caligula is thought to be one of the kings referred to in verse 10. So you may think, what does any of this have to do with Joe Biden? Only that he has been instrumental in bringing America to being the mirror image of ancient Rome. His inauguration was the trigger that flushed America into the moral and spiritual cesspool that it had been circling for several decades. Joe Biden represents the power and debauchery of Roman excess. Now, as far as LGBT being the antichrist, my opinion on this becomes more firm as the weeks and months pass. Others are seeing the same thing, and I dealt with this in a previous video. Two of the main characteristics of the Antichrist in Revelation 13 is opposition to God and committing blasphemy. Well, LGBT has become the idolatry of our age, enshrined in every corner of our society and the world: business, education, government, media, and policy. You worship at their shrine, or you are branded as a bigot and excluded from the public square. In a recent tweet, Tim Carney wrote, quote, "Transgender ideology is built upon a religious conviction. There are premises here. The premises here are not provable or falsifiable. They are simply a belief about the soul. And, frankly, a belief rejected by nearly every culture in human history," unquote. And yet, here we are, bowing down to transgender ideology. Just last Sunday, 4 days ago, Charlie Kirk tweeted that congregants at the Cathedral of Hope UCC Church in Dallas were led in a prayer pledging allegiance to drag queens and LGBTQ+. This is blasphemy. America is becoming, and now is, the modern representation of the Roman Empire, covered with blasphemy, holding a golden cup filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. She is the whore of Babylon, and LGBT is her lover. Pride is the pregnant mother, and trans is the new religion. It's a whole world system, backed by all the major players I mentioned a few minutes ago, opposed to God and filled with blasphemy. Now, this pot has been brewing for a long time, but Joe Biden is the one who served the stew. In his position of power and perversion, he opened Pandora's box to unleash the sin that will provoke the curses of the bowls of Revelation 16. The plagues of Revelation 16 find their imagery in the plagues God launched on Egypt for their idolatrous religious deceit. And that's where we are now. Their sins are symbolic of complete moral and spiritual death in a godless society. That's where we are now. The earth refuses to worship their Creator, and they, in sheer defiance, refuse to repent. They bow instead to propaganda and perversion. Their minds are darkened with their rebellion against God, and God is giving them up to their deviance. People seem to think that a good president will save us. But the Bible teaches that even a good leader won't save the country if the hearts of the people don't change. Judah had several ungodly kings, but then Josiah came along, possibly the most godly king Judah ever had. But the hearts of the people never changed, and after Josiah's death, evil kings reigned, and the country reverted back to their sins, and they quickly fell to invaders. I still won't be surprised if America falls to a Chinese invasion next year, as I covered in a previous video. We seem to think it'll never happen to the United States, but every major empire in history has eventually fallen. Since our leadership is godless and our culture is blasphemous, God's judgment on us would not surprise me in the least.